Hi everyone, welcome to today's Sales Enablement webinar. My name is James and I'm a digital designer here at Oomph. In today's session we'll be covering the basics of a sales enablement app. I'll explain why a sales enablement app is useful, cover a few ideas about sales pitching and go through the basic development of a sales enablement template. So here I have a brief rundown of what we're going to go through today. So of course, why a sales enablement app? We have a couple of live examples to go through that we've already published using the Oomph platform. So a couple of those are Honda Digital Brochures and Sky, the One Central Park development. We're going to go through the user experience of a sales enablement app and a few of the Oomph features that really contribute well to that. Also designing your app. We do have a template that we're going to be going through. I'll be showing you how to build it, and also you'll be receiving those files at the end. So don't worry too much about taking notes, but of course feel free to. But you will be getting these files at the end of today's session. Building your app, so going through a few different license types, app artwork and icons, the basic requirements for building an app, and then of course I'll be taking you through our publishing center and also going through a few other things to consider when making an app, especially a sales enablement one. We do have a question and answer section at the end, so if you do have any questions throughout, we have Leanne moderating today. Feel free to put them in your question box at any time and we'll be able to get to them at the end. Right, so let's get started. So why a sales enablement app? There are a few key reasons why sales enablement apps are quite useful. So how can they benefit your sales team? They can help you streamline your sales process. So having a sales enablement app on your iPad allows your team to structure the user flow of the app around your company's sales process. It allows the content to be fully tailored to suit your needs, your brand, and your business model. Sales enablement apps can be all-in-one sales tools. They allow you to have all your sales materials in one place, so you no longer have to deal with printouts or PowerPoints that can often lag and crash. Also, brand perception. Having a sales enablement app on an iPad often creates a positive influence on brand perception. Not only does it look more professional than a laptop, but also you can store all of your information and retrieve it quickly. You can show videos, slideshows, and other content tailored specifically for your process. We have a few examples of that following this section. It's an engaging medium. Making an appealing sales process, you can do so on a personal level. Often with an iPad you can sit next to the person you're selling to, going through each of the features one by one and having a process laid out in a really logical order that really sort of contributes well to your sales process. Also, your iPad can be connected to all projectors and you can also have that on large conference screens as well, so it's very convenient. So I've got a few quotes down the bottom here. So a few statistics. The CEO of Novartis stated that moving to an iPad presentation saved reps, and this is a very large company, on average 250 hours over the course of a year and allowed them to make a total of an extra 35,000 customer visits per year, which is quite good. So a few more. Selective distribution. So often in sales enablement pitches, there's often company-sensitive information. So you can select to distribute the sales enablement app to specific iPads within your company. It doesn't have to be public facing and you don't have to publish to the App Store. So you can do that with authentication or an MDM. Also, if you do choose to publish it to the App Store, you can have a private section that obviously the user needs a password to go on to get to. So you can collect and share client information. So one project we're working on at the moment in the Oomph office, we've actually got client feedback within the app. So at the end of the sales process, obviously we have fields where we can collect the client's phone number, their interests, what products they're after in the pitch that's just happened. And all this is taken into the app. And we use a few third-party applets for this, but basically at the end, everything's stored in an Excel spreadsheet and it's really neat and logical and no information gets lost, which is great. Inbuilt sharing. This is a really positive use for sales enablement apps. You can share sales information directly from the app to your client and they can have the required information in their inbox before the meeting is even finished. So say you've got a slideshow you want to share, if you have the right functionality built into the app, you can share specific slideshows, maybe product information directly to the person you're selling to on the spot. And also, as I said before, convenience. So overall, the iPad as a sales tool is quite convenient. It looks professional, more so than arriving in a meeting with a stack of paper or a large laptop. and it can be easily transported. Most projectors, as I said before, connect to the iPad, and you can present with the same device in the boardroom, at a cafe, or anywhere in between, so you don't have to be swapping between devices. There's a few examples I'm going to go through. First of all, the Honda brochures. There are a couple of other ones we've recently worked on. Some of them we can't show in here because obviously they've got sensitive sales information in there, but we can talk about their aims and objectives. So recently, well, last year we worked on the Westfield Brand Space app, and basically they have a lot of information to put in their app and a lot of images. If you printed it out, the document would be well over 100 pages, and going through a PowerPoint in that process with so many pages is quite cumbersome. So instead of, if you want to get to a specific product that's, on page 90 of your PowerPoint, it's going to take a long time to actually get to that. So having an iPad and everything built in with Oomph navigation, you can actually swap between pages and get to required content very, very easily. So there's a few benefits there, but we've got a couple of live examples. So Honda brochures is one of them. This one is a public-facing app, so it can be downloaded from the App Store as a brochure, but it's also been used as a kiosk app. A few weeks ago, we had a kiosk webinar, so feel free to check that out on the Oomph webpage. But let's have a look. The Honda app. Right. So as I said, this was published to the App Store, so it is a public-facing app, but also useful as in kiosk mode, which Leanne covered, I believe. So in here, these were derived from print files, but they obviously needed an app that allowed people to access the website and also information on their cars that wasn't just endless printed content. So in here, they've kept it very visual. They've got all of their images of their cars in very large format. And going through here, they've used Oomph objects to get the information flowing through here nicely. And also with all of these, there is a call to action. So directly from the app, you can find a dealer, request a test drive, or even book a meeting at a Honda showroom. And these all link to the Honda website. So not only was this to gain interest in the cars, but it was also as a call to action to get people to go to the website, to find the nearest dealer, request a test drive, find out more information about not just the car they're looking at in the brochure, but also the full range of products. It should be noted here that the style of app that Honda has used for this is the library app, meaning that when the user goes to the iPad, they'll have a Honda brochures app, and in there they'll have separate brochures for each of their models. So they'll have the Civic, the Odyssey, the CRZ, the CRV, all laid out there in different catalogs. You can choose to do that, or you can have everything in one and then break it up in the navigation. It's completely up to you. Honda decided to do it this way. So just close that. We'll go to the next section. So a few things you can include in here that you can't include in PowerPoint is also sort of total view of the product. So in here, obviously, we can swipe through and rotate our car, which is quite nice. And these are all very simple to achieve and don't require any code. And again, on each page, there's a call to action. So going through this product information, and of course, you can hide all of that and just have nice full images. And all of this as well, it's staying on Honda brand, so it's very, it relates quite closely to the Honda website and also Honda magazine. So it's very customizable. And again, we've got a few other features. So scrolling text, and obviously with this, what they wanted to do was hide all the information if you needed to, so they could have nice full images in there. Right, just a few other features through here. So they've broken this up. So they've got interior shots, exterior shots, detail shots as well. And going through with a lot of these pages, you can also view the images full screen. See if we can get to one of those full screen. Here we go. So of course, galleries. And in the Westfield example I was speaking about before, because that was only used on a few iPads, that was released via an MDM, so only about 6 salespeople had access to that. A lot of the time they'd have image galleries of sections in their shopping centres that I actually wanted to share. So up the top in the Westfield app, they would have a share icon, and then they could distribute the image gallery they were currently looking at to the person they were talking to. But obviously this is a public-facing app, so the user can take it away with them wherever they want. So Oomph animations have been used in here as well. Let's just go to also, rather than, obviously, if you did have a PowerPoint or even a printed document when you were pitching to someone, normally you have to cycle through different pages to view things just as simple as different colored cars, whereas here, the user can select what they want to view it in. And it's just a lot more streamlined and less clunky than going through a traditional print document. And of course, detailed information. And this normally would take a fair few printed pages to display all of the information in here. So it's all safety and security information to dimensions, weight capacities, tires and wheels, and it's all neatly laid out in a table for each of the models. All right. So these are just some more image galleries, as you can see. So there's one more example I would like to show you, and that's the Sky app. So this was designed by Frost, and we also had our technologist Tony Redhead working on this as well for our panoramas, which came off very well. And this was, first of all, you could download this from the App Store. So obviously it was distributed to a large number of people, but also it was used as a kiosk app and also a direct sales tool. So it's sort of covering all the bases with this one. And one key part of this app, which was really useful, was of course email sharing. So obviously in here, you can not only send a link to the app, say if this was being presented to someone, but also a screenshot of what they were looking at. So say if you were looking at an apartment floor plan or something similar, or even a panoramic view, it would take a screenshot of the page you're currently on, load it up in the Chrome here, and then of course you can share that to whoever you're talking to, or they can share it with a friend. So one thing that we're particularly proud of, and was very useful, is viewing each of the plans. You can view 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-story apartments. You can take tours of specific apartments and also view the finishes. But first, I'm going to show you the 360-degree spin of the building. So if you swipe across the screen here, you can see each side of the building, but also what apartments are on sale. So here you can see, the size of the apartment, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-car spaces, the finish that it's even going to be. And if you want more information, you can even look at the floor plans, specifications, so it's a duplex, the westerly facing. You can have a preview of the finishes of your apartment. And you can even have a look at the view you're going to get from your apartment, which is fantastic. Okay. So to be noted there, the panorama is something that was built custom for this app. But of course, all of the finishes, the specifications panels, all this is done using basic Oomph objects. No code is required for these, and it's all very easy to do. So also, you can post to Facebook from here, so there's social sharing built in if you really want to. So that'll post a status update, it'll take a picture of what you're looking at with some predetermined text, saying, I'm looking at One Central Park, etc., etc. Let's go back to the home page. Oh, there we go, the Facebook's just come up. Sorry, it's a bit laggy today. And you can even take a tour of the apartments, the panorama. It's a very nice touch. So traditionally, normally, say if this was being presented by a sales representative to someone wanting to buy one of these apartments, either you'd have a PowerPoint or a series of slides, and it'd just be very clunky and cumbersome when you've been trying to flick through things. And just having the app in front of them is really nice because it not only sort of allows you to see the floor plans and share things, but having the panoramas in there, and these are of course mock-ups because obviously they were buying off the plan, it just gives the sort of the prospective buyer a really good idea of what they're getting. And it gives them a really good experience and reflects really well on the Sky brand as well. Like, it's a very professional package to have. So that's a few benefits. So let's have a look back at our presentation. Now, just before we look into our demonstration file and our templates, I'm just going to quickly go through the user experience of sales enablement apps. So you can customize your sales enablement app to complement your brand, streamline your sales process, and engage customers with a range of features available with the Oomph platform, including email sharing. You can share relevant sales information during the sales meeting, rather than, obviously, as I said before, stumbling through a PowerPoint or writing down emails or getting business cards to follow up on. You can share image galleries and sales documents on the spot with a simple share button. Slideshows, so you can use slideshows for mock-ups, sales projections, graphs, tables, product comparisons, and client testimonials. And using these Oomph features can not only help display information in a logical format, but it also looks quite nice. Navigation style. So as you saw, the Sky app was obviously a standalone app. So when you tap on the Sky application on your iPad, you're taken directly to the final document. There was a standalone document. There's also a library app, which Honda was using, which obviously I mentioned before. That will have a library when you tap on the app, and then each of your products laid out there. And it's up to you what style you want or what style you need. And specific tailored content. So having app navigation built around your sales process. So the examples we saw here, they had the Oomph built-in navigation, the iOS 7 Oomph viewer, but you can have custom navigation if you see fit. The example I'll be going through and the files you will get have a basic custom navigation built in. So it'll give you a nice idea of things you can change, and you can really customize it to your brand and what your sales team needs. And of course, you can collect client information, get feedback on the spot. And the great thing about Oomph is you can also incorporate third-party widgets to gauge feedback and obtain client information. So, designing your sales enablement app. So this section, we're going to be going through building the app. We're going to be going through the Oomph platform, Oomph learning resources, looking at a template, and getting started. So what is Oomph? Oomph is a versatile tablet publishing platform that allows print and web designers to create and publish rich media apps without any code. So one way, when I'm taking clients through Oomph for the first time, one way I like to describe it is, one basic thing is that it's a really, really good document viewer. Of course, all the files you're going to be working with, the majority of them can be just PDFs, JPEGs, PNGs, things like that. So, for example, the Honda example we saw, everything was basically a PDF. Even the car that spun around, that was a series of JPEGs. So it's all very, very simple to build. And the designer you're having to build the app often already have the skills they need to actually work with Oomph. They've just got to export everything in the right way, and it's very, very easy. So when you're a designer or yourself first engages with Oomph, there's, of course, the Oomph website and the support and learning site as well. And this is a great way to start off with learning Oomph. So let's quickly have a look at the website. So here's our support and learning page. And when it comes to actually building your app, the majority of Oomph designers use InDesign. It's a really great tool to use. Everything is built around hyperlinks and has everything we really need. So our export settings, if you just go to oomphhq.com/support and learning, and the first thing you need to do, so you've got a copy of InDesign, you need to know, first of all, how to set up InDesign so you can use Oomph. So you see here, this is our learning page. And we have our InDesign PDF export settings. So your designer will have InDesign, they'll have their Oomph login, and the first thing you need to do is set it up. So this is just a quick example of how easy the support site is to navigate and use. So it's got everything laid out here, really basic. If you're a designer, you've seen this a million times. And we have all of our layouts, so compression formats, how to downsample your images, so you don't have to use Photoshop to edit anything. You can take print files if you've got them and use them directly in your app, which is fantastic. And then also, color conversion, so it looks great on the iPad. It's all very good. And then once you've laid all of those out, it's time to start building your app. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to show you, first of all, the template, and then the back end of Oomph. So we've got a really basic sales enablement template here. We've based it around cars. And it's somewhat similar to the Honda one, except we've put in a custom navigation. So of course, first of all, there'll be your landing page. This can be a brand landing page. It can have a start button, anything you see fit. And we'll go across to our opener. So with Oomph pages, you can use any file format from PDFs to JPEGs, PNGs, video files, HTML, if you know how to use it. And also Oomph animations. So in here we've got custom navigation, so you don't have to use the Oomph one. But of course you've got your contents down here, and you can jump to each of these sections, or you can swipe across with the navigation arrow. So then find a product features. So of course tap points for you to go through, so you can keep your images and your examples, maybe even a sales graph, nice and large. So when you're selling it to someone, they can see the graph at all times, or the image, or whatever you're selling to them, and then of course finer information underneath. So you don't have to be flicking through a large page of text. It keeps it nice and visual, and of course easier for them to follow. So put an example of sharing in here. So you can actually we'll give you these files at the end, and you can see how this is built. I will be taking you through it now, but you can use this as a template to build your own sales enablement app. So you can have links to the App Store, links to a website, and of course the image that we're sharing there from the app. And of course, as we saw on Honda, comparison tables, which is great for comparing products or different product lines. Oomph animations and objects. Of course, you can describe a product to your customer, and then of course they can have the full thing on screen. And then finally, feedback forms. So this is using a Wufoo form, which is a third-party application. All you have to do is have a link in here that links to our webpage, and then of course you can take clients' names, clients' emails, phone numbers. You can customize these fields as well. So any particular product you would like to know more about. There are a few other applications you can use. We're using Wufoo here. Typeform is a very good one that we often use. It's quite affordable. It's very cheap. And you can have multiple choice questions, questionnaires, as well as just basic information. So let's have a look at the back end of this to see how the files are laid out. And after we've done this, we'll be getting into the InDesign files. So as you can see here, this is our bundle. And each of these folders, you'll see here, so cover, intro, features, sharing page, specifications, cockpit, and more information. Each of these are the pages we've swiped across going through here. So if we go back to our cover, this is our cover page. In here we have an animation. So obviously we have a fade in. This is controlling a fade in animation. Then we have our first page, which is our background, a car which fades in, and then of course our text, which is the car focus. So this is each of our layers. So imagine when you're building an InDesign document, you would have each of these on a different layer. And then going through, we swipe across, and all of a sudden we're at our intro page. And again, we have a movie file, and we have our text in a PDF. So you can layer different file types in Oomph, which is really good. So you can even have a JPEG or a PNG sitting here, or even a HTML file if you wanted a form, or even a login. You can have links to websites and also links to social media. Everything can sit in here in this folder, all neatly bundled. We swipe across again, and of course then we get our features page. We have a car object. You'll see you tap on each of these points and it brings up the text here, which is in the text box. So it's all very logical in the way that it's laid out. And this continues, so on and so forth. You go to each page as you swipe through here. Right, so let's have a look at our InDesign file. Right, so this is our InDesign file. And I'll actually be going through exporting each of these pages and going through the features in more detail. So we've got a bit of time in this section. Oomph designers will be somewhat familiar with this. And hopefully this will show you a few new features that maybe you haven't used before. And for first timers as well, it'll give you a really good idea of the working process, but also all within the sales enablement spectrum. So there's a few different ways we can lay things out. I'll go back to our source files for a moment. And the way that I like to lay these out, so we'll have a folder for our final bundle. So this is our export bundle, and this is actually what gets uploaded to the App Store. And then of course our source files. If we have a really long document, normally I break up each of the pages into separate InDesign documents. This isn't that long, so we've kept it all in one for today. And you can lay out your layers any way you see fit. I've just kept mine to animation, so layer 3 is my hyperlinks, and then I've got my artwork layers as well. But basically for our first page, all we need to have is, as you saw before, we need to have, first of all, our base layer with just our colors there, and then our car. And then finally on L1-5, normally, oops, let's change that to L1-3. So we'll go through naming conventions here before we do anything else. So you'll note here that each of our layers we have, pardon me, L1-1, L1-2, and L1-3. The L stands for landscape. Oomph apps can be used in portrait and landscape mode simply by rotating your iPad. If you wanted to have an app that was primarily portrait, of course you would name it P and obviously design the page so it's portrait in layout. Landscape, obviously, we're working on the landscape page now. If you wanted to have an app that covered both orientations, you would start off by designing in a portrait document. So obviously our page size is here because our iPad is 1024 pixels wide and 768 pixels high. Obviously, if that was portrait, it would be the other way around, so 768 by 1024. If you wanted a page that covered both orientations, design it in portrait, and then instead of naming it P or L for landscape, you would just call it B1-1, and that stands for both. So basically, if it's a portrait page, the width of your document just stretches, and it scales to fit your iPad and becomes a long scrolling page instead of fitting perfectly in landscape mode as this one does. So the other names here, so L1-1, that stands for landscape, page 1, layer 1. So if we go back to our working file, we only have L1s in this document, but if you wanted to swipe down at any time, so you have a second page underneath this and continue swiping much like a magazine app, you would just call that L2-1, L3-1 for page 3, and so on and so forth. So that's the first number after the letter. And after the dash, we have another number, and that's our layer. So of course, in our cover, L1-1 is the background, L1-2 fade in is our animation, and then L1-3 is actually, I think that's our Oomph logo. It might be. I think it's a hyperlink. So that'll be sitting over the top of the Oomph logo and take us to the Oomph website. All right. So naturally, to build this page, you would come through in your layers. I have obviously my bottom artwork, then animation, that's my fade in. So I have my car sitting on top there. And normally you'd have your layers a little bit differently. Like you could potentially have less. I've got a few extra ones that I've sort of thrown in down the bottom. And that often happens when you're familiar with using Oomph, you sort of have a few different layers doing a few different things. But when I normally start, I have artwork, animation, and hyperlinks. And then I just hide these to export them. So say I wanted to export this bottom page, I would hide all my layers, whoops, yep, except for the one I want to export. Export this, I go to my example files, sales enablement bundle, my cover, and in here I just create a file called L1-1, so landscape, page 1, layer 1. I still export for print, so Adobe PDF print. Save that. I'm going to replace it because it's already open. And in this section, the export settings we've seen before, when you input those, you'll give it a name. I've just called mine Oomph. You might call it iPad or whatever you want to name it. I select the page. This is page 1. And because I've put in those presets, all my compression, my marks and bleeds and my advanced settings, my color correction. That's already done. Hit export, it'll replace that. And that's exporting a page. So from there we go, we just replace that. So with each of those layers, I'll export those in order, and then we can test it. So that's quite a basic one. So a lot of people might want to know a few more advanced things. So I will be going through this navigation menu, but for the first time as well, just be doing some more basic things first before we build up to that. So in this page, we've laid it out. We actually did a video for the text coming in here. So we laid this out first, took it into our selected motion program, whether that is Apple Motion or After Effects. And then we created our L1-1, which is a movie file. And that text will fly in, so we can just preview that. That'll come in there like that. You could also use an Oomph animation. We just selected to use a movie file for the example of the webinar and show different file formats. And then, of course, we have our text sitting on top. So for this purpose, you would create a file in After Effects or Motion, 1024 by 768, of course, in the page size. Create your animation, export that as a movie or an MP4 or an M4V, any video format that basically plays on an Apple device. So obviously nothing Windows, so no Windows movie files. And then name that L1-1, and that'll work in Oomph fine. Then on top of that, we just have our text, and then you're ready to go. So also in here, we have our features page. So after this, we'll get onto the custom navigation. First, let's have a look at these objects. So of course, with this feature, we tap on each of these plus. So each time I'm clicking here, it's resembling a tap on an iPad. And then I'll bring in each of your slides down the bottom. So let's have a look at that. And for this, we're going to be using objects for a moment, so you can see them easier. Okay, so we have two objects on this page, one being on the bottom and one sitting above that. So this one up the top, let's look at our hyperlinks panel. So if you think of the way InDesign works, it often feeds in images from folders, and Oomph works in very much the same way. So when we export this page, in say features, we have our L1-1, and that looks pretty much like a plain page to everyone who sees it. All we have is our header and our arrow that's telling us to move to the next page. What you don't see on this page is hyperlinks. So we've actually got, and I'll quickly show you this in preview. So if I look at my links, you can see there's a link here and a link at the bottom. And these links actually feed in images or slideshows from extra folders. So let's see how they made it. So naturally what I do is I lay out my page first of all, like a flat page, and then if you want, I deconstruct it. So I create each of my tap points. I'd imagine how it wants to work, maybe even do a wireframe for it. And once I've sorted all of that out, I'd actually go ahead and make it functional. So we lay out our car, we lay out our buttons, and also we lay out our text box beneath it. Then we have to separate it all so it actually works. So to start off, I would just simply use the frame tool, create a normal box. So I've done that up here, and this is the same size as the car or the image that needs to feed into it. And you'll see that I'll create a hotspot. So obviously when I'm doing this, you go to the hyperlinks panel, new hotspot, let's bring this up. You need to always remember to uncheck your shared hyperlink destination because that'll stop it from working. And this is an object, but I'm going to call it car1, and that car1 relates to our image there. So that's our car1 image. So car1, and this actually has an animation on it, which is scale up. So if we look at our finished file, I'll just go back onto the page. And you can see it's scaling up just a little bit, about 5%, just sort of growing a little bit, just to give it a bit more depth. So that's our animation at the end of that, tacked on there, scale up. Update on my computer. Okay, so you've said car 1, scale up, so okay. And down the bottom here, you have an object called text box. So down there. Let's have a look at that in our file structure. And of course, text box has a multi-page PDF, and that's got, as you scroll through, it's got each of our bits of information about different parts of the car that we tap on. When we tap on different buttons, these will change. So once you've laid out your landscape page, feel free to export that as we've done. So exported L1-1. And then inside of our car 1, we have some hotspots. So let's have a look at that page. So here, normally what you'd see is just this plain page, a car, and some tap buttons. What we see in InDesign, we have hyperlinks on each of those buttons, and that's giving an action to our page. So let's have a closer look at that. You'll see here, separated by commas, we have a few different commands. And this looks scary to start off with, but it's actually quite basic. So when you look on the Oomph documentation page, you'll be introduced to objects, which are quite basic things, really. So you'll put an action on an object. So obviously, our first object is text box. And if you remember back to our final file, text box relates to this folder, which contains all of our text pages. So we're applying an action to text box. We want that when we tap on this hotspot. And keep in mind that the area, the size that you make this is your tappable or live area. So when the user taps on this, they have that area to make the action work. So we're applying an action to text box, and then action is go to page 2. And the transition is, of course, push, which is what gives us this moving across. So when you first come onto the page, it's going to be blank because page 1 is empty. Let's just navigate back to this. Oh, sorry. You can swap between each of these. Sorry, I've got all these cloud updates and they're slowing my computer down. Now let's navigate back to that page. There we go. A bit slow, but there we go. So the first one, as you can see, is blank. And we tap on this, and remember, our action was action, text box, page equals 2, transition equals push. So we come in here, we tap, and that goes action, text box, page equals 2. And this one is very similar. It's just page equals 3, page equals 4, page equals 5, page equals 6, etc. So then each of these have got different actions applied to them. So of course this one, so action, text box, goes to page 5, again, transition equals push. So very, very simple. So once you've exported your landscape page, export your car object, which sits here. And also, of course, we have our text box sitting here. And remember in your layers to keep this above that, like the text box above the car image. Otherwise, you have the car image bleeding over the top of that. So it's best to keep it on different layers. I've got it in a sub-layer, so it's sitting above it. And then we lay out a page for each of these text box pages. So keeping in mind as well, these have to be very specific sizes. So our text box, if you look up the top of the screen here, it's 1024 pixels wide, so the width of the iPad, and 188 pixels high. And of course, this page is very similar, well, exactly the same. 1024 by 188. And each of our pages are in the same manner. When exporting these, they are named a little bit differently. So when we do go to export them, you'll note we did it as a multi-page PDF. We kept our L1-1 in here, but anything that is an object or a slideshow, in other words, anything that is fed into an L, a P, or a B page is technically a slide. So we simply call that S1-1. So slide page 1, layer 1. You can have multiple layers in a slide. You can even animate within a slide or put other objects inside of them. So they're quite versatile. So again, L for landscape, P for portrait, B for both, and then inside of those, we have S pages for slides. Quite simple. So now I'm going to show you something slightly different, which is a shared layer. So let's have a look at our finished file again, and you'll see here coming over the top of that, we have a tap icon, and of course we have a navigation moving over the top of that. So let's have a look at how that's structured first in the back end of our app. So as I said before, we have each of our pages. As you swipe between them, we have cover, intro, features, we have our share page, but at the bottom we have this shared folder, which I didn't cover before. So let's have a look at that. Inside shared, we have layers, objects, and widgets. Widgets, this is where we put the information for our form, which at the end, I'll go through that. We also have objects. Let's first, though, go to our default layer page. And this looks pretty plain, to be honest. Doesn't look like there's anything on it, but there is. If you look at L1-5, and the reason we've called it L1-5 is because in all the other pages of our app, going back to cover, intro, all of these only have about 3 layers. So layer 5 sits over the top of all of these. If you have more layers than that, I would suggest just calling this the highest number, because we always want the top shared layer to sit on the very top of all of our documents. Let's have a look at our links. So you'll see here, if I minimize, we actually have an object here. And that object is, of course, our menu. So let's have a look at that in InDesign. So this page I skipped past before, because it's a little bit more advanced, and I wanted to show you those objects first. So we have a plain page, look at our hyperlinks panel, and of course, this has menu in it. So that's sitting off the page, because we want to actually move that onto the page, so it's somewhat hidden at the moment. And inside of this shared layer, so what this shared layer means is it's actually going to be applied to every page in the app. That's why it's in the shared folder. So not only will it be in the cover page, but it's also going to be applied to every single one of these throughout the app. So it's in default, that means it sits on every page. If you don't want it to sit on every page, I would suggest just taking this and putting it in the folders you do want it to work on. So we have our layer 5 there, but also sitting inside that is a shared object. And what a shared object is, basically what we had in our features page, we also had an object called car, and that's only applied to the features page. If we wanted an object to be applied to every page or every instance where we have an object name, we would have that in a shared object folder. So of course, we have in our shared layers page the default layer with our menu object on it, and in here we actually have a menu panel. So let's have a look at that in our InDesign file. So we have a landscape page, that's our shared layer page, and inside of that we have menu, and here's our menu page. Oops. And this is applied to every instance where we have the menu object. Let's have a look at that again, how it works. Any page within the app, we have a plus icon. And if you really thought about where the hyperlinks are going to be sitting, we would actually have the rest of that hotspot sitting here, because it's always sitting slightly on the page. And then all we have is a simple action hotspot that calls it onto the page. So let's have a look at one thing we have in the Oomph platform is a debug mode. And this will actually allow us to see all the hotspots on the page. So you'll see here, this green bar is actually our hotspot, which, when you look back at this page, is this area here. When a hotspot is green, that means it's working, it's live, and it has content sitting within it. If it's red, that means it's broken, and it has nothing sitting in it. Of course, when you tap on that, it comes onto the page. So now that we know what it does, let's see how it works. So if we look at this panel, and quickly here, you see it's a plus icon when you tap on it. And then when you tap on it, it changes to a minus, and this of course moves onto the page. When you tap on it again, it moves back, and the minus becomes a plus. So therefore, we have 2 actions actually working on this page. We have one action that calls this panel onto the screen, and another action that changes this from a plus to a minus. So if we look at this page, this moves onto the screen, but we actually have another object within a menu panel, and that we call icon. So therefore, if we look back at our shared layer in objects, we also have, in addition to menu, icon. And our icon pages are simply a plus and a minus. They're the two pages that we're going to be swapping between when we bring that menu panel onto the page. And on each of those panels is where we have our action hotspots or hyperlinks. So if we take a closer look at the plus icon, what we're going to see is we have an action. It's applied to the menu, and it asks it to go to a various position. And I'll be going through that position in a moment, so we explain what it is. Then, of course, we have a second action, and that action is applied to our icon, and this just goes to the next page. So this swaps between a plus and a minus. So all of these names we've got here, they're explained on our Oomph documentation page. There is a few other presets you can put in here, but at the moment we're just going to be using these basic ones. So let's go over that again quickly. We have an action applied to the menu, which is, oops, we have an action applied to this menu panel, which contains this artwork, and that's moving to position 0, 0. So what does that position 0, 0 mean? When you look at an Oomph page, or just an iPad page in general, there's a few things you need to remember. So there's dimensions, but there's also locations on your page. And remember how I said before, our iPad page is 1024 pixels wide and 768 pixels high. This position here is 0.00. So if we go across here, this is 0, 1024. And if we go here, it's of course 7680, and this is 1024, 768. So when we look at this object, and it's saying action menu position 0, 0, what it's saying is when you tap on this hotspot, move this menu panel to position 0, 0, meaning move it onto the page. And when you tap on the minus symbol, we have an object saying action menu position original. So it goes back to the first state that it started in, which is of course off the page. And then we have action icon page equals next, meaning this is our icon and it goes back to the next page, which of course is plus. So it swaps between plus and minus. So let's have a look at that working again. We start off with our menu panel off the page. We tap on our icon hotspot, and that says action menu position 0, 0, and also action icon page equals next. So it moves our menu panel onto the page and changes our plus to a minus. And in a minus panel, of course, you tap on this, moves our menu position back off the page to its original position and changes the minus to a plus. So if there are any further questions around that section, of course, we will definitely have a question section at the end, so feel free to fire all those questions away and we'll get to them. But we'll move on to the next section. So in here we have sharing. So this is a bit more basic than the menu we just saw. So if you tap on the share icon there, it brings up an email, and we've got an image in there and a bit of text. And of course, from there, you can also just put in the person you're sending it to, and it'll send exactly where you want it to. So let's have a look at how that's built. So we have a few objects on this page as well, or 2 objects. And of course, they're very similar to the car image before. We've just called them image 1 and image 2. And they just move onto the page. They're animated in. So which are, when you come onto your page here, they move on there. But what we're interested in this page is actually a sharing button. So if you look a bit closer here, what we have, whoops, is a hotspot that is called share email 1. So of course, we'll go back to our bundle. look at our share page, and we have, of course, our L1-1. We have our two images that move onto the screen. Whoops. And we've applied our animation to the slide there rather than in the hotspot before. So, and to make an animation work, of course, it's just naming it for what it does. So move in from left, and we've just taken that from our animation page on the Oomph documentation site. So there's a few different animations we have: moving in, pulsing, scaling up, scaling down, and they're all available there. But what we're interested in here is the share email. So of course we looked at share email 1, and in here we've got a few different pages. So the first one, the easiest one to look at is image. So of course that's the image that we're going to be sharing. So that can be a JPEG, as long as it's called image, that will sit within the email body. Let's have a look at that again. We tap here, and of course we have a subject. So we've just called our subject text to go here. And then thought you might like to see the new Oomph Orion, and then a few different things here. So, so we have our image, our subject, and that's just a text file document. So really you can just use, if you're on a Mac, text editor. If you're on a PC, you can use Notepad, and you just name that whatever you want. So we've just put text to go here. You could say, sales meeting and the date, whatever it's going to be, you can put that in there. And that's really easy to edit. Really, you just drag that down into your text edit. And I'm just going to say, welcome to Oomph. Save that, close it, and I've changed my email text, subject line. There's a couple of options you can have for your body. You can do exactly the same thing for your body of your email, which we've got here, which is, of course, thought you might like to see the new Oomph Orion. I've gone a step further with this one, and I've actually made that, I styled that in HTML. If you don't know how to use HTML, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to use it. I just use a text. So, of course, you'd have one called body.txt. So just make that in a text file in text edit or Notepad, put in the body of the email, and then away you go. But because I wanted to style this, I wanted to make it bold. We'll just have a look at that. And you can see here, thought you might like to see the new Oomph Orion, and we've got links in there as well. And that was fairly basic. All you have to have is like your body, and then just apply bold tags to the first line. And that's it. And if you don't have the knowledge of HTML, you don't need it. You can just have a text file for that. And that's a file we don't need. So really all you need is 3 there. Sorry, there was a few extra files we didn't want. So let's change that again. So we have body, which can be a text, image, and 2. So let's quickly test that. I will take you through side loading after this, but I'm just going to quickly do this using Oomph Editor, which is available on the documentation site. And I'll tap on here. The subject didn't come up. So let's have a look at why that could be. Got to call it subject, not 2. There you go. Welcome to Oomph. So it's quite easy to change that as long as it's called subject, not 2. Sorry about that mistake. And then, of course, you just put in the email address at hello.com, blah, 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 and send away. And that's how you have a share email. Share Twitter and share Facebook is very, very similar. So as you saw in the Sky app, we had a share Facebook. For that to work, all you would have to have is create your icon, and probably use a Facebook icon for that. Then you would have share Facebook 1, you'd have a body for the text you're going to have, and an image. You just don't need a subject. If you're doing that to Twitter, please keep in mind there must be 140 characters in the body, so keep it short and nice and sharp. All right, and let's share email. So let's go to the next page. Whoops. And So here we have our specifications page. So as you tap on each of these, it will take you to various information pages. So of course, in Honda we had powertrain, and we've just copied that here really. Chassis, exterior, interior, and this could be, you know, even it could be sales stats. Instead of having pages and pages of sales stats, you could have, you know, this could be months of the year. It could be different products and how they've sold over time. So it could be anything really. You don't have to have cars or models. So let's have a look at how that's laid out. So for this, we've used a page swap. So that is a multi-page PDF. It presents one of these pages at a time, and obviously you tap to swap between these pages rather than swiping. And then within each of these panels here, we have a VIPS, which also stands for Vertical In-Page Slideshow, which is scrolling text. And then, of course, each of our VIPS pages sit within this folder. So let's have a look at how that's laid out in our InDesign document. Here we go. So you'll see here we have each of our pages laid out. So this will be in our L1-1. And the reason we've got so many is because we've got each time you tap on one of these. So if you tap on safety and security, this is the page that will be presented to the user. Obviously with safety and security highlighted. If you tap on interior, same thing, it shows the interior page. And then of course we have a different vertical in-page slideshow on each of these pages, giving information specific to the interior or exterior, etc., etc. How this works, so it's a page swap. So each of our hotspots, if you look here, that says R1. This hotspot is R2. This hotspot is R3, and then obviously this will be R4 and R5. R stands for replace. So really what you're doing is you're replacing the current page that you're viewing with obviously page 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So you're swapping between these. And then of course in each of these you have a different VIPS. It's VIPS 1. They're all called VIPS 1, but that should technically be VIPS 2. So, or let's go through and rename those actually, because they're incorrect. So VIPS 1, and these are relating to these pages, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the reason we're going to different vertical in-page slideshows is, of course, we want information on the powertrain, chassis, exterior, interior for each of these page swap pages. So to edit a hotspot in Oomph, it's quite easy. You just open it up, make sure shared hyperlink destination is turned off, change that to 2, and hit enter, and away you go, and that's it. So again, 3, oops, 4, and we have a few people who are familiar with Oomph here that might want to say, can we just use the URL bar up here? Yes, you can, so long as when you've built the hyperlink, obviously with your frame tool, that you've made sure that shared hyperlink destination is turned off. Oops. So select it, delete, and what was this? This is 5. Okay. Now let's export that. So I'm exporting pages 19 to 23. And they're in specifications L1-1 swap. So SWP is a page swap. And that'll export those pages. So just a quick explanation here of how this actually works. All of these names, whether it be VIPS1 or SWP or P1-1, they're all pre-built in the platform, and it knows to read those names and apply certain actions to those names. So for instance, we have all these laid out, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. That's just our folder order. You can go up by increments of 1 if you want, but I wouldn't suggest it. The reason we've gone 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 40, 45, 50, I should say, is say someone comes in and says, okay, I want another page to go between features and share. If you had, page 3 and 4, you'd have to rename all these folders. So we go by increments of 10. So of course, if you can just slot in the 35 in there, it'll sit between those pages. So Oomph will come in here and it'll look at page 45, specifications. It sees the page swap, so it knows it has to look for an R1, an R2, an R3, etc., etc. All of those are laid out in here. We have a hyperlink, so R1, R2, R3, R4, R5 that go to each of these pages. And it also knows, once I'm on this page, okay, I have a VIPS1. I now need to find some information to put inside that VIPS1. So when it comes in here, it looks for VIPS1, and there's our slide. So all these naming conventions are predetermined, and all you have to do is name your files in the right way, and of course, you'll be able to export it. So finally, let's go down to the bottom. And the final page in this is very similar to the menu we went through before. So we can brush past that, and all that is so we have an action sitting in this icon, and that action will be applying the first thing to this menu panel or info panel, and it'll be saying action info panel moved off to the left. So in this case, it won't be moving on to 0, 0 as the one over here did. It'll be moving on to another value, probably around 600. So instead of 0, 0, it'll be 0, 600. And the second action will be changing the plus to a minus. So we have two actions there as well, very similar to this page, so we don't need to go over that in detail. And finally, we have our feedback page. So in here, we can collect client information, first name, last name, email, phone number, and do I want to know more about this? This is creating using the Wufoo form. So once someone has filled out this information, it will be sent to the Wufoo webpage. All of these third-party applications work in different ways. Typeform, for example, once someone has filled out the form, it will email you the information direct to a selected email account. So say if I was selling this to someone and they filled it out, it actually send their information to me straight after they'd submitted the form. Sometimes you can also elect it to be sent to something online that can be exported as a spreadsheet, which is really great. So there's different ways to do it. We use Wufoo, which stores it online, but also you can download it and it can email it to you as well. So let's have a look at how that's built. So if we look at this page, we have just our artwork. So we have just a grey panel, image, but our hotspot is actually quite big, and that's called Form 1. That's because our Wufoo form is actually a bit larger, but the main sort of information area sits within this spot. So we've had to make the hotspot a little bit bigger. It's a little bit of trial and error to get that the right size, but we've finally managed it. And of course, you just call that, we've called it Form 1. You can call it anything you want. But because this is an extra asset, we'll put this in our shared folder. So we look at more info. All we've got in this page is our L1-1 with a hotspot, much like an object hotspot. So we go into shared widgets because it's a third-party widget, and we have our Form 1 folder. And in here, this is what we've actually downloaded from the Wufoo webpage. Depending on what service you're using, obviously Typeform is quite a bit more simple, which is why I use it. I simply have one folder with a link in it, linking to their webpage, and that's it. We've had to style this because it's a little bit more in depth, so I won't go through that in great detail because if you're using some different services, you may not need to do that at all. But all we've got is sitting inside Form 1, all of our HTML information. So this is the same as a HTML page. So it's basically just a HTML page sitting within this area with our form in it. As I said before, this is a more complex one, so there are more basic ones out there if you don't have that knowledge, so don't worry. You can still use forms or third-party applications. Just find one such as Typeform, which is incredibly basic. All you need is a link. We've styled this one because you actually have a fair bit of direction over how you want it to look with Wufoo. That's why we've opted to go for this, and we've actually styled it using CSS and put everything in the HTML document. But again, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But that's basically where it's all placed. All the styling, again, is something we've done on the side. Okay, so that's our template. You will be provided with this template at the end of the session. So if there's anything you're wondering, I'm not sure how the menu item worked, of course, you'll have that asset to play with. You can change the values, you can change the colors, you can do whatever you want with it. So you'll be getting that at the end, which is fantastic. And let's go back to our presentation, finish up. So we're coming up to the question section soon. So I'll be able to answer anything that you may want to know more about. Okay, so building your app, what you will need. So there's a few basics you'll need when building your app, and the first one being an Apple developer account. So before you even start the Oomph process, you'll need to set this up, and an Apple developer account allows you to create an app that functions on iOS. You also need an iTunes Connect account, and this will allow you to publish to the App Store. Then finally, you will need access to Oomph. So signing up for Oomph will give you an Oomph login. Once you've spoken to your dedicated account manager, etc., you'll have access to our publishing dashboard. And this not only acts as a dashboard that holds all of the information you need to build your app, and also the publishing certificates issued by Apple Developer, and the app icons and artwork, but also gives you options around the navigation style. So for instance, you could have that custom navigation that we saw in our template, or you could elect to just use the built-in Oomph navigation if you're short on time. You can also choose to have either a library or a standalone app. So as we mentioned before, this is a library style app. I know it's a bit small there, but basically what it is, you tap on your app icon and you have each of your issues sitting there, much like here. So instead of having, obviously I've got the folders I created in my presentation and the different apps that we've seen today, but it'll have issues with images rather than just blank, because obviously these are just side loaded in there. Also, inside the Oomph Publishing Center, it will also give you artwork requirements. So in addition to the app bundle, it'll give you sizes you need for app icons and splash screens. So let's have a look quickly at what they are. So I'm going to log into the publishing dashboard now just to give you an idea of what it looks like. It's pretty friendly. So once you sign in, obviously I've already signed in here. I'm just going to use Honda as an example. Once you log in, if you've only got one app, obviously it'll go straight to your page. Because I have access to everyone's apps, I have to search for it. So I'm going to look for Honda. So here we go. So I can see that normally you'd come straight to this page and you would see what apps and magazines you've got available. Obviously I've got Honda Magazine, we've got Honda Digital Brochures. I'm going to have a look at that. So say you've chosen your magazine name, or your, not magazine, but sales enablement app name. And you'll first come across with this page. So these issues here, this is what you're going to see in your library. If you have a standalone app, you will have only one thing here. So obviously with the Sky example, once you tap on the app, it takes you straight to the content. So you'll have one. Otherwise, if you have a library app, you'll have many. In here, of course, you'll see you can change your name up here, the credentials. So that's where you upload your certificates from Apple Developer and iTunes Connect. So it's actually saying, yes, I'm registered, I can publish to the App Store, etc., etc. Then we have sections called icons and splash screens. So the icons is actually the icon you see on your iPad. There's a few different sizes. There's a few reasons for that. So if we look here, I've got a few examples. So I've got the Oomph icon here. You have an iPad app icon, but also that must be supplied in different sizes. So for instance, iOS 6 icons are different sizes to iOS 7. iPad Retina icons are different to non-Retina iPad icons. So for instance, iPad 1, iPad 2, and iPad mini without the Retina display are slightly different sizes to iPad 3, 4, iPad Air with Retina display. So there's a few different ones. These are all PNGs though, so you just have to size them in Photoshop and export them. And also splash screens. So when you first open an app, you're going to see a brand page that quickly comes up. And we supply these in a few different formats as well. But this is all laid out in our icon and splash screens section. And then just quickly, for publishing purposes, we'll quickly go through this. Once you've built your app and you're happy with it, as I am here with my sales enablement bundle, all I need to do is compress this. If you're on a Mac, you just follow this exactly. So compress sales enablement template. If you're on a PC, it works in the same way. Instead of compress, look further down the list. If you're on a PC, when you right click and you'll see send to, and you send it to the zipped folder. We have a few people that have a few issues with that because there is a compress icon, but you must send it to a zipped folder on a PC. So once you've got this zip file here, which is your app, say if I want to, I'd created a new issue. So if you click on new issue, you give it a name, a live date, things like that. Once you've done that, you'll have a frame. So I'm just going to go into CRV Diesel. So this is the app for this car. And you'll see here there's the name. I can edit this as well. So they're the settings we've set up when you create a new one. You can put an issue description, things like that. Whether or not it's paid. So this is a free app. If it's a paid app, of course, you have to put in the iTunes Connect code. And then all I have to do is upload. And it's pretty much like uploading anything online. You just search for the right file. So I get my zip file, I choose that. I'm not going to upload this to a Honda brochure, obviously, so I'm not going to choose it there. You hit upload. I'm just going to escape that. And once that upload process is finished, you'll see another line come down here in our state panel, and it'll say ready for proofing and published and make available to users. What happens now is that it's not live yet. Obviously, the green one here called published is live. If it's in this yellow or orange state, that means it's still in proofing. So anyone who is authorized to view in your app will be able to see content, proofing content. So like, maybe yourself, your manager, so you can check it to see if it's fine. And then once that's okay, they've all given the go ahead, you've done proofing, which your account manager will take you through. You can just click publish there, and that'll make it available to everyone with the app downloaded, not just the proofing group. So it's fairly simple once you've set up all your certificates and your Apple developer account. But again, this process, which I've gone through now, your account manager can take you through in detail. There's also very fine details and step-by-step instructions on our Oomph documentation and support pages. So that's just a quick breakdown. It's fairly simple though. Right, so a few more things to consider before we get to our question and answer section. With sales enablement apps in particular, one key thing you want to consider is how your app is going to be distributed. So you can either, like Honda and Sky have done, publish it to the App Store. Anyone can download it. Most of the time, sales apps are free if they're public facing. Otherwise, you can use an MDM or a mobile device management system. And this will allow you to publish to specific iPads. So for instance, Westfield did this. It was a private app that had sales and statistic information in there. So that was only published to about 6 iPads, but it's still running on the Oomph platform. We just released it privately. Otherwise, with distribution, you can also push it live, but keep a sensitive information in a private section, so with authentication, so users need to log in to see it. If it is published on the App Store, though, it must be noted that you have to have some public content, so you can't just publish an app and have a login, well, this style of app straight away. So who will be using the app? For sales apps, sales enablement apps, you have sales executives, business development managers, and you've got to take that into account when you're actually designing it. So for instance, the Westfield example I used before, their app, the navigation and user experience was built specifically for about 6 or 7 salespeople. And it was actually ingrained in their sales process. So from start to finish, they'd be using the app in different ways to sell different products in different ways. So that was taken into account when we were actually building it. Also take into account training and the documentation for relevant parties involved. Obviously, if it's going to be ingrained in your sales process, you will need to train your salespeople how to use the app instead of just giving it to them and saying, present with this. So Westfield, of course, they were quite thorough. They went through their entire training process with the app, and it worked out very, very well. That's all of our points for now. Any other things I have? Oh, a few other things to note. Just quickly, when building all apps, keep in mind, especially if it's public facing, the bundle size. So if you're including a lot of videos, that's going to impact on the size of the app. Obviously try and compress them and keep them down. Same with images, because the more images and the longer the videos are that you put in your app, the bigger the download's going to be. If you're going to have forms in there, you're going to have an internet connection. So when actually using an iPad, you might want to either have a 3G, like a SIM card, or make sure you're connected to Wi-Fi. Otherwise, forms and web-based content won't work. And that's about it. If there's any questions, now is a great time. I will be taking you guys through sideloading an app quickly to your iPad so you can test it without publishing. But while I'm doing that, feel free to throw some questions at the end, and I'm going to quickly show you how to sideload. So if there's any questions, pop them in the question box now, and I'll be getting to them in a couple of minutes. Well, while everyone's thinking, I'm going to quickly show you how to sideload. So to sideload an app to your iPad, so this way you don't have to publish it through our Publish Center. You can actually test it directly in your iPad really easily. So once you've built your content, you've got your content here, you're happy with it, you compress it, and all you have to do is go to iTunes. I've got my iPad connected, so make sure it's connected with your cable, and then open your iPad up and go to, I'm going to use Oomph Viewer. If you've already got an app built, you can sideload into any Oomph app. But this is what we do. Go to your iPad, click on your apps section, scroll down. I have a lot of apps on my iPad, so this obviously is quite full. If you've only got a few, obviously it'll be quite easy to find. I'm going to choose Oomph Viewer. If you do have another app, so such as, we've done stuff with the MCA and Qantas, you can select this and sideload directly into their apps if you want to test it. But otherwise, if you don't have your app built yet, go to Oomph Viewer. And all you have to do is select the zip and drag it in there. And when you open Oomph Viewer, it'll be available in there. Obviously, you guys can't see my iPad that I just dragged this into, but it has appeared now. So it's just installing and opening up. And that's how you sideload. So I can actually test this without publishing to the App Store, which is fantastic. And it's great for your designers. So if you don't have the simulator, which I was using today to present on, sideloading to your iPad is just as quick. Yeah, so that's everything I've got to show you guys. If you have any questions, now's the time. And we'll wait a couple of minutes for any of those to come through. Yep, I've got a question. So I've got a question around presenting on an iPad on a projector, so which is quite a good question, because we covered before that you can use an iPad sort of as a one-on-one sales device, or also to connect to a projector in a boardroom. Apple sell a whole lot. It's just really an AV connection cable. I can't remember the exact name, but they sell them at the Apple Store, Dick Smith, pretty much everywhere. And all it needs to be, I'm seeing, because we've actually got a few here. It's just the one we use is actually the connection you use to a PC. So it actually connects into your iPad, either a Lightning or a 30-pin adapter, connects to your iPad that way, and then it's just got the PC connection how you screw in the pins. We just use that one for connecting to most projectors. You can also connect through Firewire, a lot of other cables as well. So AV, Firewire, and yes, so the one we use is called an Apple Digital AV connector, and they're about $30. I mean, if you look on eBay and stuff, they're a lot cheaper. They sometimes don't work as well because the Apple ones obviously quite expensive. So I've purchased some from eBay. They're not always the best, but the option is there. So that again was the AV wire connector. No other questions? Well, if there's no other questions, thanks very much for attending. You will be sent a follow-up email with a link to download these files. And of course, if you do have any other questions you come up with later, feel free to shoot us an email. There's either sales@oomphhq.com. Otherwise, There'll be links in the email we send. Thanks very much for attending today's session, and I hope you learned something. Thanks very much.